Hi, folks. Welcome back to American Lit. We are discussing postmodernism and, in particular, Entropy by Thomas Pynchon. Now, Thomas Pynchon is my favorite postmodernist author of the fantastic, bizarre little novel called The Crying of Lot 49, my favorite postmodernist novel, at least of the ones I've read so far. Pynchon is a kind of an interesting figure. This is a picture of him from probably his college days in around 1950s. He was born in 1937. He was a student of Vladimir Nabokov in his European Lit course in the 1950s. You might remember Nabokov. You recognize the name from his novel Lolita, which is a story about a much older man and a very young girl in a very inappropriate relationship. It's controversial and still troubling even today to read. Pynchon is a recluse. Nobody's really seen him that much in all these years, except for, and let me pull up my slide again. This is worth seeing. A couple of appearances on The Simpsons where his character wore a paper bag over his head, and I haven't seen the episode, but just that image alone is hilarious. There is one photograph that has been taken of him in recent years, and a kind of humorous attempt at figuring out what he might look like now, might look like today. Let me see if I can pull that up for you. Here it is. Yeah. Okay. There we go. And what you can see is they've just taken the original photo and aged it and added a mustache. Which, I think Pynchon has a good enough sense of humor. He would probably find that pretty funny. But anyway, this is his work is satirical, often funny, as is the case in The Crying of Lot 49. There is a prerequisite amount of paranoia, which you find in postmodernist novels. Now, postmodernism, remember, sprung up in the aftermath of World War II and the world after the bomb, right? A lot of the things, they say the modernists killed God. Nietzsche declared God is dead, and so much of what we had formerly argued and explained by the use of the supernatural, the actions of heaven and of God and all that, was done away with because of the advancements in science. Well, the postmodernists, believe it or not, took it even further than that. They began to look at everything with suspicion, like meta-narrative. Meta-narrative is like where you have one grand story, or they say there are only 5 great stories, like man versus nature, man versus man, man versus woman, and so on and so forth. Postmodernism looks at these things with suspicion, right? So even a constant and continuous plot line, where you follow one character throughout his development, like in the case of a Bildungsroman, like the story of a person's journey from innocence to experience, that's suspicious. So if you're reading this story and scratching your head going, what is with these characters and what is happening? Don't worry, you're supposed to react that way. Okay. There's a lot of symbolism in this story. The names of the characters, for example, are symbolic, and the actions, but we'll get into that in a minute. I need to tell you, his 2013 novel Bleeding Edge was a National Book Award winner. There is no consensus, according to our textbook, as to where Thomas Pynchon's place is in the American canon among American writers. His prose is imaginative and witty, as we'll remark on as we're talking about the story. He has a gift for saying things that were thought to be beyond words. Now, you'll pardon me as I flip my notes here. Okay, Entropy. Now, this refers to the laws of thermodynamics. Essentially, it means that everything is slowing down. Everything that is or that continues is headed toward an eventual end. Okay, let me and I'm going to pull up a slide here about that defines thermodynamics. Give me just a second. Bear with me. So here we go. This is a slide. The definition of entropy: the real world change and dynamics follow the laws of entropy. In other words, the layman's version, the non-scientific person's version of it is everything that is moving toward not being. Everything that is was slowing down. We see this as like, when you throw a baseball, You may throw it with great velocity, but that velocity tends to drop off the further it gets away from the point of your arm where you threw it, right? And we apply the same thing to the sun, to everything that is in motion. He says everything that is happening is coming to an end. So entropy, the definition of entropy is potential decreases while entropy increases. Higher entropy suggests more disorder. That is, the more the things are breaking down, the more chaotic things are. Suggests that time moves in one direction, always forward, never backwards or side to side, just one direction, that's forward. For example, when a mug is in its solid form on the table, it has a relatively high potential in the form of bonds between the molecules. In other words, when you have a mug sitting on a table, it has a lot of high potential there to just be a mug, right? Because the molecules are all together working on the same purpose, being a mug. Statistical definition: the number of possible microscopic arrangements that could produce the macroscopic object. Now, thermodynamics, here's how that applies. Entropy also happens when the hot coffee that begins to cool in the mug after it's poured. The total energy of the mug decreases as the heat flows out and entropy increases. In other words, once you pour the coffee in the mug, it's going to start to cool down, right? So that's kind of what our story is about. And entropy here is the description of life and nihilism, and my cat behind me, who is not affected by entropy. In fact, she moves fast all the time. That part won't be on the test. Don't worry about that. Okay, so on the one hand, we have, I said there's a lot of symbolism here. We have two characters. We have Callisto, the guy upstairs, and Obad, his girlfriend. Now, they live upstairs from Meatball Mulligan. More on him in a minute. But Callisto and Obad are trying to save a bird, and they have, well, Callisto's trying to save the bird. Obad is just kind of, his assistant moving around the apartment, which has become a sort of geodesic dome, a biodome, if you will, wherein they have all these plants and all this life here, and they've managed to kind of more or less seal themselves off from the outside world. They never have to leave. They keep the temperature fairly constant out there, because he's worried about two things. Number one, he's worried about the universe ending in fire. Everything, heating up. He says things are going to heat up. Things are going to heat up. Yet it maintains a 37 degrees outside where they are. Right? Callisto is from Greek mythology. She was one of the worshippers of the goddess Diana, one of the followers of the goddess Diana, who was seduced and got into let's face it, Zeus was kind of a rapey guy. So Zeus raped Callisto because she was beautiful. And she kind of got a raw deal because Athena turned her into a bear because she was no longer pure. Right? So here we have what that tells us about Callisto, our character, is things probably aren't going to end well for him. Right? He's a true believer, but ultimately what's going to happen is he's going to be betrayed by that belief, or the belief that he has is going to fail him. And his girlfriend is named Obad. Obad, a song or a poem appropriate to or greeting the dawn. That is, it's a morning song. Like da 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 da, if you've heard that in the cartoons, or a poem or song about lovers separating at dawn. As I heard it described once, an Obad is a poem about lovers saying to one another, "I hate to leave you, but I got to go before your brothers and fathers show up," or in worst case scenario, before your husband shows up. So you get the sense of that. He probably gives us a sense that things maybe aren't going to go so well for this couple, right? And it informs the sort of desperation they have in trying to save part of the natural world. The dawn is coming, the end is coming, trouble is coming, we're going to have to be separated, but we're going to try to save something of the world right here in our little apartment, right? Now, in contrast to them, we have Meatball Mulligan, which is a great name in and of itself. And the first time we see him, Meatball's asleep. And he is several days into his lease-breaking party, right? Lease-breaking party, he's holding this wild, crazy party to try to get kicked out of his apartment, trying to get thrown away out. He has a freeform jazz band in his apartment. And that is not an accident either. This is symbolic because freeform jazz is based largely on improvisation. And remember, postmodernism has this suspicion and mistrust of grand meta-narratives. This applies even to music. And they would appreciate jazz, freeform jazz, because you never know what's going to come next, right? The party is attended by government girls, and their lives are just one continuous party heading to a logical end, which is eviction, right? Now, what does this mean? Well, in the greater symbolic sense, this is an approach to life, right? Ultimately, we're all going to die. Everything that is going to fall apart. It's going to collapse. And so the best thing we can do is just have as much fun as we can until we get there. In fact, we're going to push that potential end, right? You ever met somebody who says, you know what, I eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. I'm just gonna eat what I want. I'm not gonna exercise. I'm just gonna have as much fun as I can until I keel over. That's the approach here. Callisto and Abad, however, have created, of course, something of a closed environment, and they're saying so we have these two warring factions. Well, not even these two different approaches. They're not even at war really, because Meatball is just downstairs. He's annoyed, but he's ultimately affable. And then we have Callisto and Abad upstairs. Callisto is desperately trying to save this bird, trying to protect him, thinking that, okay, the universe is eventually going to burn up, but for now we've got to take care of this place. We've got to do something. We've got to ascribe some meaning to this. We've got to do something, right? So it's time. At this point, we need to talk briefly about nihilism. Let me pull up a slide on that real quick. And this is comical, but it also makes a really great point. It's a wonderful visual pun that drives the point home. So we have nihilism, this empty box up here. Nihilism, I believe in it. Right? Nihilism essentially is probably best summed up in this quote by a philosopher and all-around cynic, Arthur Schopenhauer. We can regard our life as a uselessly disturbing episode in the blissful repose of nothingness. Human existence must be a kind of error. Okay? Kind of depressing. So what they're saying, what the nihilists say is nothing really means anything. Right? First there was nothingness, and then there was a glitch in the matrix. There was a hiccup in the system, and suddenly we wound up here. We were just sitting there, minding our own business, doing nothing, being nothing, enjoying nothingness, and then suddenly here we are, we're alive, just as a result of some cosmic accident. And then once we're dead, we'll be back to nothing. So really, life doesn't mean anything. It's just this momentary glitch between nothingness and more nothingness. So what's the point, right? And so these two couples, these two apartments here, Obad and Callisto upstairs, trying fruitlessly, desperately to save this bird, and Meatball and his colleagues downstairs having this never-ending party, saying, you know what, we're going to keep partying until we get kicked out of here, with the government girls and the freeform jazz band, and later on the Navy guys who show up thinking the place is a brothel, which also is probably, as I think about it, is probably something to do with postmodernism as well, because, you know, if nothing means anything, if it's all pointless, what is the difference between a party and a brothel, right? And whatever you ascribe meaning to. Okay, so, Callisto is in the climax of the story. Something really fantastic and exciting happens. They ultimately switch places, right? Meatball, in his never-ending lease-breaking party, decides, you know what? If maybe nothing means anything, but I really need to try to make things better. He says, I need to fix the fridge. I need to take care of this guy over here who's passed out, and I need to just try to make a go of it. Right? He realizes that in the midst of everything, even if it is meaningless, maybe we can ascribe some meaning to it by doing the best we can for other people, by being better people. Meanwhile, upstairs, Callisto ultimately fails to keep the bird alive, and he despairs. He's crushed by it. He is overwhelmed by the hopelessness of it all, and he just gives up. And he realizes that there's nothing he can do. And so in reaction to that, Obad goes over to the window and smashes it. Now outside it's 37 degrees. And so she goes over and sits down on the bed next to Callisto and waits for the temperature to equalize. Now it's not enough to freeze you to death, but at 37 degrees, Callisto and Obad and every plant in the place is going to succumb to the cold and to hypothermia and die. Right? So, and what is brilliant about this story is there are two approaches here in the face of nihilism. You can, and I'm looking down at my notes here, you can either make the best of it and do what you can to make life better, even though there's no point to it, then in the end it's just going to all fade into nothingness. Or number two, you realize it's ultimately pointless and you just give up. And that's the story here. That's Thomas Pynchon and his rather brilliant story Entropy, which for me encapsulates the entire postmodernist dilemma. All right, so hope you enjoyed the video. Love this story. I taught it for the first time in 2000, the spring of 2022, and it blew my mind. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for tuning in.